The date is the late 2nd century, and you are standing in a long, high-ceilinged room somewhere near the center of the Roman Empire. The floor beneath your feet is not stone, but a mosaic of tiny colored tiles, still cool from the morning air. Around you, voices bounce off the marble walls, a low hum of conversation punctuated by the occasional laugh. You are holding your clothes bundled in one arm, and you have nowhere to put them. There are no lockers, no hooks, no shelves built into the wall. You are expected to simply know what to do next. That moment of disorientation is the first clue that the Roman bath was not anything like a modern spa. The common image we carry is a shimmering pool of perpetually hot water, steam rising in lazy coils, water pouring endlessly from decorative fountains and lion-headed spouts. We imagine pipes hidden behind the walls, a constant, invisible flow that delivered heat and refreshment on demand. It is a picture so vivid that it feels like ancient history, a lost technology of pure luxury. The truth is stranger, and it begins with the fact that the water was never truly running. You have arrived at a kind of public institution that was more engine than fountain, a system built on fire, gravity, and the coordinated effort of dozens of unseen workers. The baths you're about to enter function not because of a pressurized network of underground aqueducts feeding private showers, but because of a precise, labor-intensive choreography that began long before you walked through the entrance. Think about the simple act of filling a basin with hot water in your own home. You turn a handle, and it arrives. The Roman had no handle. They had a bucket. And the bucket was not filled from a tap, but from a large communal pool that had been heated by an immense furnace underneath the building. That furnace, the Hypocaust, was the true heart of the Roman bath, and its existence reshapes everything you think you understand about ancient comfort. The Hypocaust was a hollow space beneath the floor, supported by stacks of tile pillars called pilae. The fire burned in a separate chamber, and the hot air from that fire was drawn through the void under the floor, then up through channels built into the walls. The entire room became a radiator, the floor warm to the touch, the walls radiating heat, the air thickened with the scent of heated stone and dry clay. But that heat did not extend to the water supply. The water in the pools was heated separately in large bronze boilers placed directly over furnaces. Here's the contradiction that snaps the modern assumption in half. You came expecting luxury. What you find is a system that demands enormous physical effort to produce each bath. The aqueducts brought water to the city, yes, but that water arrived at a central storage tank, not at the individual bathhouse. From that tank, it flowed by gravity through lead pipes into a cistern beneath each bath. Then the real work began. Slaves carried buckets of cold water from the cistern to the boilers where the furnace attendants stoked the fire, controlling the temperature with raw experience. The furnace itself was a dangerous, constant presence. It had to be tended day and night because the entire bathhouse depended on a steady temperature gradient. The water in the caldarium, the hot room, had to be scalding. The water in the tepidarium, the warm room, was kept at a lower temperature, and the frigidarium, the cold room, held unheated water from the aqueduct. The baths were a cascade of heat, each room preparing your body for the next extreme. But none of that progression could happen without a team of people feeding wood into a blazing chamber underground. Every one of those heated rooms, every moment of scalding water, it all came from the backs of people hauling buckets and feeding a furnace that could never stop burning. If that shifts the way you see ancient luxury, then subscribe, because we are only starting to pull back the layers of what human civilization really cost. Drop a single word in the comments that captures how this changed your image of those baths: furnace, slaves, or effort. Whatever hits you first. You can feel that heat now as you step from the cool air of the changing room into the warm, still atmosphere of the tepidarium. The air is heavy, almost viscous, and the light is dim, softened by the small windows placed high in the walls. The only sounds are the echo of dripping water and the murmur of other bathers. You have not yet touched the water. You are only standing in the room, letting the heat seep into your skin. This is part of the sequence, and it has no equivalent in a modern shower. The water itself is not a constant flow. It is a fixed amount, heated in batches, and once it arrives in the pool, it begins to cool. The bathers know this. They enter the caldarium not to soak for an hour, but to experience a specific sequence of sensations. First, the dry heat of the room opens your pores. Then you are scraped with a curved metal tool called a strigil, which removes oil and dirt from the skin. The oil had been applied earlier, in a separate step as the primary cleaning method. Soap, as we know it, was not the main agent. The cleansing came from the mechanical action of the scraper and the heat of the room. Now, you are on a marble bench in the caldarium, the hot room. The air is thick enough to taste, carrying the faint mineral scent of the water and the smoky tang of the furnace below. You hold a small bronze vessel, a gutus, and you pour a thin stream of cold water over your head. The shock is sharp, but you do it deliberately because the contrast is part of the ritual. The bath sequence was not a passive indulgence. It was an active, almost athletic progression, a series of shocks and releases designed to stimulate the body. The water you just poured came from a bucket carried by a young attendant who walks between the pool and a large, heated basin. He moves with a practiced rhythm, his sandals slapping the wet floor, his bare arms glistening with steam. He doesn't stop to speak. He is part of the invisible infrastructure, as essential as the furnace itself. Without him, the scalding water in the caldarium pool would never reach the bathers. Without the furnace, the water would never be hot. Every degree of heat in this room is a direct product of human labor, not a hidden pipe. This is the deep truth that most modern retellings of Roman life miss. We see the grand arches of the aqueducts, the magnificent facades of the thermae, the intricate mosaics, and we assume the experience was effortless. We imagine the Romans enjoying the same convenience we do, but with better architecture. The reality is that their comfort was purchased with a completely different currency. Not technology, but coordinated human effort. The furnace, the buckets, the scrapers, the attendants, these were the moving parts of a machine made of flesh and fire. You have already felt something similar, even if you did not name it. Have you ever stood under a hot shower after a long day, and for a moment, the simple sensation of warmth on your shoulders felt transcendent? That is a pale echo of what the Roman bath was designed to produce. But the Roman version required a journey. You had to move through the cold room, the warm room, the hot room, the steam room, the scraping, the oiling, the cold plunge. The reward was not the water itself, but the deliberate, escalating process of reaching it. The order mattered more than the cleaning. Scholars debate the exact sequence, but a common pattern emerges. You undressed in the apoditerium, a large room with benches built into the walls where you left your clothes with a guard or simply trusted your neighbors. Then you entered the tepidarium, the warm room, where your body adjusted to the rising temperature. From there, you moved to the caldarium, the hot room, where you sat in the steam and heat, often exercising lightly or having your skin scraped. Finally, you plunged into the frigidarium, the cold pool, to close your pores and invigorate the circulation. The cold plunge was not an afterthought. It was the climax. Your body, saturated with heat, suddenly hit the cold water, and the shock was sharp and cleansing. The Romans believed this sequence strengthened the body and cleared the mind. They were likely right. The alternation between extremes, dry heat, wet heat, cold, creates a physiological response that modern science recognizes as therapeutic. But they arrived at this knowledge through experience, not through double-blind studies. They felt it in their bones. Now consider the scale of the operation. A large imperial bath, like the baths of Caracalla or the baths of Diocletian, could hold thousands of bathers at once. To heat the water for that many people, the furnaces burned continuously, consuming vast quantities of wood. The Hypocaust system was not a small fireplace. It was a network of fires, each with its own attendant, each needing constant feeding and cleaning. The ash was removed, the flues were cleared, the water levels were checked. The entire building was a living organism, warm to the touch from foundation to roof. That warmth you feel from foundation to roof was no accident. It was the signature of an engineering system that turned the entire building into a living thermal machine, with the cold plunge as its deliberate climax. If you want to keep walking through these ancient structures with us, subscribe to stay part of the journey. And I want to know, does understanding the science behind that cold shock make you more willing to try it yourself? Drop your answer in the comments. The engineers who designed these baths understood thermal dynamics in a way that modern architects sometimes rediscover with surprise. The floors were raised, the walls were hollow, the windows were placed to draw hot air upward and release it. The heat moved through the building without pumps or fans, driven only by the physics of rising air and the relentless labor of the furnace men. It was a passive system, powered by fire, sustained by human motion. The building breathed. You are still standing in the tepidarium, and the minutes have passed. Your skin is warm, your muscles loose. You have not yet entered the hot room. You are waiting, because the sequence demands patience. The Roman bath had no clock. You stayed until your body told you it was time to move. This is another difference from modern life. We rush through a shower in 5 minutes, thinking of the next task. The Romans spent hours in the baths, moving slowly from room to room, talking, exercising, resting, and returning. The baths were the living room of the Roman city. Business was discussed, alliances were formed, gossip was exchanged. The bathhouse was a social equalizer, where a senator and a slave might share the same warm steam, although not in the same pool. The experience of heat and cold was communal, a shared ritual that reinforced the bonds of the city. The water itself was not the point. The point was the place, the people, the sequence of sensations that everyone knew and performed together. If you have ever been to a public pool or a communal sauna, you have touched the edge of this experience. You have felt the awkwardness of being partially undressed among strangers, the small talk that floats in the warm air, the silent agreement that everyone is submitting to the same discomfort and pleasure. The Roman bath was that feeling, but amplified by the scale of the building and the heat of the furnace. The water was not running, but the ritual was flowing, and that flow was the real infrastructure. The deep pattern is this: every civilization that builds lasting structures also builds the hidden labor that makes those structures possible. The aqueducts we marvel at were not a standalone miracle. They were the beginning of a chain that ended in a bucket, carried by a person. The baths we romanticize were not a luxury delivered by pipes. They were a performance staged daily, requiring an army of invisible workers. The comfort of the bather was the visible outcome. The furnace man, the water carrier, the stoker, the scraper. These were the hidden muscles. You are part of this story, whether you know it or not. Every time you step into a warm room, you are tapping into a solution that humans have been perfecting for 2,000 years. The Romans did not invent the bath, but they turned it into a public institution, a piece of civic architecture that defined urban life. They did it without running water in the modern sense. They did it with fire, stone, and people. That is the secret that the tile floors and marble columns have been hiding all along. The hot room awaits. You stand at its threshold. The air shimmers with heat, and the pool stretches out in front of you, still and dark, not a ripple breaking its surface. The steam rises in thick waves, blurring the edges of the room. You have a choice. You can step forward into the heat, or you can turn back to the cold. The Romans knew that both were necessary. The heat opened you, and the cold closed you. The cycle was complete only when you had experienced both extremes. The bath was not about comfort. It was about transformation. You lower yourself into the warm water. The stone seat is smooth, worn by countless bodies that sat here before you. The water envelops your legs, your torso, your shoulders. The heat seems to dissolve the boundary between your skin and the air. You are not just in the water, you are in a space that was designed to hold you, a vessel that has been waiting since the day it was built. The furnace below is still burning, the attendants are still moving, the buckets are still being carried. You are the reason for all of it. And now, with your body fully submerged in the warm water of the caldarium, a different question arises. You have accepted the heat. You have understood the sequence, but you have not yet confronted the most uncomfortable truth of all. The water around you is not clean, not by modern standards. And the Romans knew it. Their solution to the problem of hygiene was not filtration, not chlorine, not a daily drain and refill cycle. Their solution was something else entirely, something that connected the bath to the aqueduct in a way you have not considered. The water in this pool does not drain after every bather. It stays. It circulates slowly through a simple overflow system, but the bulk of it remains, heated, reused, shared. The Romans did not imagine the invisible world of bacteria. They could not see the microbes that thrived in the warm, shared water. And yet, their bathing culture endured for centuries. This paradox, the shared bath as a pillar of public health in a world that did not understand germ theory, is the final layer, the revelation that recontextualizes everything you have just experienced. The secret to Roman hygiene was not the water itself, it was the scraping. The strigil removed the oil and dirt from the skin before you even entered the pool. By the time you lowered yourself into the caldarium, you were already relatively clean. The water was not washing you. It was warming you. The cleansing had already happened in the dry air of the steam room, where the attendant's curved blade had drawn the grime away. The pool was a reward, not a solvent. This is the part of the story that the marble ruins do not tell. You can walk through the remains of the baths of Diocletian today, and you will see the massive halls, the vaulted ceilings, the remnants of the Hypocaust, but you will not see the bucket chain. You will not see the furnace man's hands, black with ash. You will not see the strigil, now rusted and buried, that once touched 1,000 backs. The evidence of the real work is invisible, dissolved by time, absent from the tourist brochure, and that is the real archaeology. The one you cannot photograph, the one that lives only in the understanding of how things actually worked. If you want to keep uncovering these hidden layers of the human story, subscribe so you do not miss the next moment where a familiar ruin reveals its true depth. And in the comments, write the word strigil, that curved blade that did the work the water could never do, to mark that you have seen past the marble and into the choreography. But you have seen it now. You have understood that the Roman bath was not a building with plumbing. It was a process. The process required a specific kind of knowledge and a choreography of heat and labor that was passed down through generations of engineers and attendants. The water was not running. The system was running. The difference is everything. The moment you grasp this distinction, the Roman world shifts from a distant, glamorous past into something much closer to your own experience of solving problems with the materials at hand. You step out of the warm pool, and the air of the caldarium clings to your wet skin. You are beginning the reverse journey now, moving back through the tepidarium toward the frigidarium. The contrast between the hot room and the cold water will be sharp, but you are ready for it. You have learned the rhythm. The cold plunge is not an end. It is the final note of a chord that began when you first undressed in the apoditerium. The cycle is almost complete. The cold water hits you like a door slamming shut. Your breath catches, your skin tightens, the blood rushes to your core. For a moment, there is nothing but the shock. Then, as you surface, the world feels sharper, cleaner, more present. The noise of the bathhouse seems louder, the light from the high windows brighter. The transformation is real. You have been through the heat, the scraping, the immersion, and the plunge. Your body knows what it just experienced, even if your mind is still catching up. You dry yourself with a piece of rough linen and dress in the apoditerium. The benches are crowded now, the room busy with the flow of late afternoon bathers. You pull your tunic over your head, the coarse fabric brushing your still warm skin. You are ready to leave. But the question that brought you here, how did they do it without running water, has been answered in a way that changes your understanding of the entire civilization. The genius of the Roman bath was not its technology, it was its integration of human effort into a seamless experience. The fire wasn't hidden. The furnace was a presence, a living thing that the building was designed around. The water carriers were not invisible. They moved through the rooms, part of the landscape. The strigil was not a luxury. It was a necessity. Every element was visible to the bather, even if the bather chose not to see it. The illusion of effortless luxury was always a choice, a consensus to ignore the engine that made the warmth possible. And that choice is the same one we make every day. The lights that turn on when you flip a switch, the water that arrives when you open a tap, the heat that radiates from a vent, all of it depends on unseen systems, invisible labor, vast infrastructures that you never encounter directly. The Roman bath is a mirror held up to your own life. The difference is that the Roman furnace was in the same building. Your furnace is in a power plant 100 miles away. The heat is the same. The distance is the only illusion. You walk out of the bathhouse into the late afternoon sun. The street is busy with carts, pedestrians, and the distant sound of a blacksmith. The air smells of dust and cooking oil. The bath has left you clean, but not soft. You are ready for the evening, for dinner, for conversation. The ritual has done its work. You have bathed, and you have been changed, not by the water, but by the process that brought the water to you. The steam on your skin fades as you walk. The warmth of the caldarium lingers in your muscles, a memory that will last for hours. The bath is over, but the knowing is not. You now carry a different image of the Roman world. You see the buckets. You see the furnace. You see the hands that made the heat happen. The marble columns no longer stand alone. Behind them, you see a city of fire and water, built not on pipes, but on people. The bath was never about the bath. It was about the civilization that knew how to make warmth from stone and breathe life into a room with nothing but air and flame.